So this is part two of Beyonce, Feminist, with a question mark. Um, I wanted to take some time to actually do a little research. Um, I wanted to do sort of going to go back, looking at the various things that we know of Beyonce, looking at the sort of images, the types of personality, uh, types of imagery that we see, as well as the types of music, obviously, the types of personality we see in the work that she offers us. Um, I think um, a lot of people will still question whether or not she is a feminist. I think the most important thing that we can do is um, to give her a chance to actually articulate that for herself, and hopefully be able to deduce, at least through her work, what kind of feminism she promotes. That's our task. Um, Talking kind of low because kind of can't talk too loud. I'm actually at a friend's house. So it's actually kind of interesting. I've never done a uh, vlog quietly. It's the second time I'm actually doing this, so it should be interesting. Um, okay, so first thing that I wanted to sort of delve into is this notion of um, sort of what is feminism. Through my research, I had to sort of go back, ask myself, well, what did I learn in class back when I was in school in 2005, 6, 7, 8, and I can't remember a lot. So I went back. I'm looking here, sort of at various different sort of notions of feminism. Our most sort of easily understood, most clear determining factor of what feminism is that it is a sort of belief in the equality of the sexes. So if you sort of believe in the equality of the sexes, then sort of at the very sort of core of it, you are feminist. Um, and that's probably an oversimplification of it. I mean, you've got people in different sort of areas or camps of feminism, but ultimately, in the main, you believe and or advocate for equality. But what does that take? What form does that take? And to what extent is that something that you can say affirmatively you stand for? And so in the history of feminism, you've got all different types. You've got, I'm sort of looking here now, you've got sort of um, a basic understanding that, um, women should be given equal rights. It sort of began with the suffrage movement and the desire to have equal access to the ballots. Then you have this transition to sort of a gender neutral, neuter sort of minimization of gender based or gender conforming language, gender conforming expectations from men and women. And then you have, from that point on, sort of a push for more rights, whether they be reproductive rights, rights for to have access to maternity leave, um, and overall just advocating against any form of discrimination that women would face. Right. So ultimately, there's sort of different fronts, but in the different forms of feminism you have, there's this unifying sort of thing, glue. When I left off in my last conversation, I asked, what kind of feminism does Beyonce promote? And I wanted to sort of look at some of the different things that I had sort of got a chance to see. One of those things was sort of over time, sort of pictures of seeing a more modest, more demure, more limited perspective or limited presentation of Beyonce and her work. But then over time, we see some changes. She becomes more comfortable. She wears clothes that are more revealing, more tight fitting, close fitting, clothes that reveal her assets um, in various different ways, whether they be physical or through her dance, through her music, or words. For me, if I had to sort of articulate what kind of feminism that she's sort of promoting, I would argue that, among these different types we have, I would argue it's one of those that promotes sexuality, sexual expression, freedom to express who one is, right? And so some people call it sex positive. And again, through my readings, is one of the things that I've been reading. And ultimately, excuse me, and ultimately that kind of speaks to this need to be able to express yourself, be able to control the form of expression that you want, right? So there's different sort of ideologies about sort of how successful that is, right? If you're talking about this sort of wave of feminism that promotes sort of a sense of self, promotes sort of who you are as a person, then I would say Beyonce does push that in her music. But then I would argue that might be simplified too much. It's easy to say that she supports feminism or supports this wave of feminism, which, women should be allowed to sort of have a sex positive art. At the same time, it's kind of deceptive because you have music that clearly is questionable, right? I mean, going through songs, you've got songs like Soldier that actively promotes, um, engaging with another male, being with a man that can, quote, flip the money three ways. You know, we have this promotion of individuality and the ability to express oneself. But on the other hand, we have this very basic, fundamentally or morally questionable way in which women sort of support a pro-capitalist or a inappropriate form, in this specific case, of engaging in the economic development of the community, right? Someone who can basically sell drugs isn't really someone who's going to support a woman's freedom of choice over her mind, her economics, or her body. So I think we have sort of what many people have argued, sort of this feminist sex war going on, right? Where some people think that, having women become agents of the quote unquote commodification of their body is indeed a step back. Whereas others argue, giving women the chance to sort of express themselves, be able to own their freedom, their sexual expression, and freedom to express themselves in a way that is in tune with themselves and their paradigm is actually uplifting. Yes, it probably is uplifting. Again, speaking from the prism of a male, I would argue that it would be uplifting if I was a female, because then I would be able to say, okay, I can choose to engage in this, or I can deny myself of this, or I can choose to engage in this, or I can choose not to, right? Not necessarily deny myself, but I can choose not to. The question becomes, well, in what paradigm are we talking, right? In what paradigm are we talking about women being able to express themselves? A woman who, such as Beyonce, and we need to sort of be specific here. If you look at a song like Check on It, you see various different representations of a woman. She has, one where she's like sort of wearing you slacks and like sort of a blazer or some kind of jacket that kind of gives a more corporate, a more sort of traditional look. And then you have her, with her extensions and her short skirts, revealing tops. Excuse me. That promote a very different image. What some are probably branding as sex positive. So sort of going back to the question, in what way is that actually uplifting if those same sex positive images are actually promoted through the paradigm of patriarchal and male sort of affirming, male supporting sort of the male control or paradigm control over women? I think that's sort of the question that we have to ask ourselves. We may not be able to answer that in one night or in one sitting, as low as I'm whispering right now, but I think the question becomes more problematic as to sort of what kind of conversation we have if we can't unpack that, if we don't unpack the lens through which sex positive expression is seen. And we're still sort of seeing it through a very questionable prism, you know. I'm actually pulling up another piece from the Vancouver Observer It's an article that I pulled up. This is actually an article from 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And in the article, I'm pulling it up right now. Let's see. Kind of, bear with me. I'm trying to pull it up. Oh, okay. Beyonce, feminist or feminist? FAUXMINIST. In the article, it talks about sort of where Beyonce was in 2012, being chosen by People magazine as, quote, the world's most beautiful woman. It goes on to talk about sort of what kind of image does she represent. It says here, with Sasha Fierce in this fresh piece of spotlight. Again, she's referring to a picture that she had in People magazine. I thought I'd spotlight something as well. Quote, not her beauty, but her feminist stance. Because when it comes to judging women, the values they embody are what they should be noteworthy. She talks about sort of the article's writer, Bianca Pence, talks about sort of what representation is she given. She talks about sort of an overt girl power message through songs like Run the World Girls. You can go on and on about sort of other songs. I mean, I can argue there's also other ones such as Single Ladies, Upgrade You, all clearly sort of promoting a girl power image, which some people argue is inappropriate right there because you're saying girl power instead of woman power. But so if you understand the dynamics there. It goes on to talk about sort of mixed messages in her songs. For example, she has songs that are sort of anti-stalker, anti sort of controlling, or sort of hegemonic, in that a man is sort of in control or a man is pursuing sort of some kind of control over a woman. And one of her songs is Bugaboo. Another one is Say My Name. And then so she sort of contrasts that, with other songs that she's done, like some we mentioned before, Single Ladies, Run the World Girls, and then even songs like Survivor, Independent Women, that all sort of play up this narrative of supporting women's independence. Quote, at the same time, though, her career, her heroes have made huge feminist missteps, like her song, quote, Nasty Girls, which slut shames mercilessly, or the little remembered DC3 girl song called Cater to You. Quote, baby, I heard you. I'm here to serve you. I'm loving it, and I'll want to do, and all I want to do is cater to you, boy. So, sort of, we have this narrative of her being sex positive, sort of challenging the sort of predominant expectations of women, or owning, rather, sort of that definition for women. But then we have songs like Cater to You, Nasty Girl. So sort of what I'm getting is this is a person who's very careful to sort of switch up every now and then what that image is. So can we really peg her as being one or the other, right? Can we say that she's entirely avant-garde or sort of challenging the status quo if she's singing songs like Cater to You? This particular article was very interesting to me because it goes on and on and on to talk about sort of her use of sexiness, being sexy, as well as someone who sort of embodies, quote, what patriarchy has told her from birth she should embody, or arguably, right, And it goes back to what I said before. If these images, if the things that we're seeing predominantly are sort of embedded in patriarchal notions of what a woman is it really pushing women to be able to have a narrative of their own? So that's a very interesting question. I would argue that because for most of the history of man, particularly as it relates to the modern development of the world over the last 400 to 600 years, you're talking about a predominance of men, in the codification and determination of success, of power, of wealth, and of what it means to be being sort of curtailed by men and males' sort of perceptions with very little support and co-construction from women. Right? And when there is co-construction, it's often denied, put down. Right? I mean, there's no question of the immense contributions to society by women, but they're often downplayed, sort of pushed under by men, and even sometimes by women, by our constant need to cater to men, right? Like the way that Beyonce wants to cater to her man. So it's contradictory, right? She's doing multiple different things at once. So I don't know. I think the image that she's sort of pushing is a very interesting one, right? I like to sort of couch this going back into terms that are succinct and terms that can be used to better understand what's going on. That's why I said, for example, is she a sex positive artist through her work? Is she a sort of third wave feminist who pushes the bounds even further, questions hegemonic structures as it relates to um, race and sexuality? Or is she still really a part of that first wave of feminism, right? Because there's three, right? There's the first wave. So to just be clear, there's the first wave that pushes the bounds on the gender-based lines, right? Equality for women to sort of have the same access, particularly white women, if we're talking about women here, in the areas of sort of political and even to a certain degree economic power. But it stops there, right? Second wave feminism begins to unravel this question of to what extent is gender being pushed onto women to limit them. So it sort of wants to question sort of the role of gender as a structural reality that's pushed down on women, right? So in other words, gender norms, gender expectations, and then sort of a third wave that questions the notions um, beyond that, um, taking into account, um, as I mentioned before, taking into account um, ideas of femininity, yes, but other things, as I mentioned before, um, the things that really affect women beyond that, that really sort of address social conditioning. I think all of these things are interesting because, on the one hand, you have people who would say that Beyonce is taking us all a step back, taking women in particular back. On the other hand, her expression, her songs, and her more recent songs. I mean, you could talk about other music that she's done, right? The more recent videos, they're stretching the bounds even further. So, now she's not just talking about songs that are going to uplift or make you feel good, but they're going to also sort of dabble in um, to self-expression on a different front, right? On a far more provocative front. Um, when drunken, I think it's drunken love. That's a song that really does promote that. A love for her husband, love for her man, right? But it does it in a very provocative, sexually explicit way. But then you have songs like XO, which sort of promotes love, happiness, in a very sort of friendly, good time, uplifting way. And then you have Pretty Hurts. I mean, you have all these different dimensions where even in Pretty Hurts, you can argue that it's uplifting women. It's giving women a voice. It's giving women an ability to sort of speak to the idea of perfection, right? Of being seen a certain way and sort of tackling that, right? Sort of addressing it and all of its evil fronts. It's very interesting because all of this music supports sort of my ultimate view, which is that the music that she's promoting is not rooted in any of those things that we would like to associate them, but rather in a sort of multidimensional show of what it means to be a young female, right? A young female in her 30s, a woman that is an independent person, a capital, that actually is rooted in something. If it's rooted in something, it's rooted in sort of a capitalist, a woman, a sort of empowering yet arguably normative perspective of what a woman is, right? She's not defying or sort of challenging sort of hegemonic structures in her work. For the most part, she's not. For the most part, she's not. For the most part, she's doing something that's very comfortable for her as an artist. But she's still able to challenge sort of notions about what she's expected to do at this day in her career. And that's what's most exciting about the work. Like that's probably more of a sort of brand of feminism that I could appreciate more than anything else, right? It is the ability to sort of express and articulate something that is uniquely you and not feel any kind of way about it, right? But if we're going to be honest about what type of sort of feminist that we see, we won't be able to pinpoint that because she's not going to allow us to do that. Right? She's not comfortable being any one type of feminism, partly probably because she doesn't really feel like she's any one of them. Right? I mean, I don't know if she could even articulate it the way that many of the people are ascribing it to her, not because she's stupid, but because she's probably just not aware, based on sort of her ability to articulate, her ability to sort of see the world for what it is. I think it's quite very simple. If you look at her interviews, look at the way she expresses herself, look at her educational attainment levels, I think they're fairly simple, right? Her work is brilliant and beautiful and catchy and exciting, but it's not a feminist manifesto, right? This is something that, and in one of the pieces that I reviewed, something that Melissa Harris Perry, a great, wonderful political commentator, she has her own show on MSNBC, but she's not creating this political or feminist or Audre Lorde feminist sort of type of feminism, because if we look at sort of the various different types of songs that she's done over the course of her career, if we look at all the different types of images and expectations and work that she's done, she's too dynamic. She's far too dynamic in her work and far too simple. And when I say simple, I don't mean dumb. I mean simple as in simplistic in her work, that she's telling a story. And she's telling more of a story of who she is than making a statement about any kind of feminism that she wants to purport. So if we had to create a type of feminism, in my opinion, I'd say it is a fairly simple, uncomplicated, pro sort of capitalist, pro status quo empowerment of other women to achieve a sort of degree of success, a degree of um, stake or status that doesn't ruffle any feathers, doesn't drastically change the way that the world is run, but gives some kind of hope, happiness, excitement, and ability to sort of encourage people to be themselves, right? To be themselves. Um, to be themselves. And I say that because her work has a very sort of independent lens, independent sort of supporting lens in which people are more and more and more in her work and in her art expressing themselves in a happy and fulfilling way, whether that be through her own sort of attachments to the work or through sort of the themes of success and happiness and being able to overcome obstacles in your life. And perhaps that's because she's been able to do those things for herself, right? And she's recreating those images in her work. Let's call it what it is. It's sort of biographical. It is artistic. It is exciting. It is catchy. It is at times uplifting. Okay, but it isn't purely feminist, right? It is not rooted in feminism. It's rooted in self-expression. And so the closest that we can call it to anything, we need to be careful in putting her into any sort of assessment that she really hasn't successfully articulated both for herself or in her music. Um, it's too dynamic, as I mentioned before. It's too multifaceted. She's pitching to too many people. She's creating too many images because guess what? She wants, as complicated as she wants her image to be, she actually wants it to be fairly simple, which is, I want everyone to be able to identify with my work. I want everybody to have, not just women, okay? Not to say that she doesn't want to uplift women, but it's you see that, and that's actually where we sort of our problematizing of this work creates sort of a full circle, right? We kind of gonna go full circle, and we start to ask the question: is her work even rooted in feminism? Right? Is she really trying to sort of make some kind of feminist breakthrough? Yeah, right? And even if she's not, right? How is her work actually supporting or purporting what already has been established in feminist thought, or through the various feminist lenses that are out there? Most of which I've talked about today, but of which a whole range, such as, I mean, you have black radical feminism, black feminism, you have um, lesbian feminism, you have separatist feminism. I mean, Is she any of those? Right? Is she a feminist that wants to see women become equal in the workplace? Is her form of feminism or supportive feminism support um, a space for queer identity? Does her feminism speak through her work to a larger global conversation about classism and rape and sort of the commodification of women through sex work and sex slavery, right? Is her feminism as dynamic as her work? So all of those things, I would leave that for you and all the people who are diehard supporters of Beyonce to sort of think about. I would probably say it's very likely none of those things, or a few of those things, if any. Beyonce is a business woman. That's the kind of feminism that she is. If there was a business feminist, that would be that would be the feminist I think that she is, and a smart business feminist at that. All right, I'm done here. Thank you for listening to me as I whisper. Good night or good day, really. It's 5 in the morning right now. Goodbye.